Meryl Barnett at the CBS Broadcast Center in New York. We want to get you now to the White House. You're looking at Ian Sams, who represents the White House counsel's office. We expect him to deliver remarks and a response to Special Counsel Robert Hur's many hours-long testimony today on Capitol Hill regarding President Biden's handling of classified documents.
Investigating the president came to the obvious conclusion that there is no case here. After all this time, millions of pages of records that have been reviewed, 150 witnesses have been interviewed. The conclusion was simple, that there is no case here. The case is closed. It's time to move on. House Republicans tried to make it a big deal. They want to attack the president politically. They're making it very obvious that they're trying to help the former president. And it's a failure. We need to work on the things that actually matter for the American people. We need to work on getting aid to Ukraine. We need to work on securing our border. We need to work on a spending package that avoids a shutdown next week. These are the things we need to work together on. And it's time that we move on. So I'm happy to take your question.
Does the White House believe that Robert Hur is acting as a partisan player?
I think today laid bare that the special counsel, who, as you mentioned, was a Trump appointee, made some inappropriate comments about the president in his report that do not match up with the transcript of that interview that now every American can see for themselves. I think that the investigation that lasted 15 months came to the obvious conclusion that there was no case to be made here, that the evidence doesn't back up bringing any charges. That's what he found. That's the result of this investigation. Even a Republican prosecutor found that. And whole House Republicans that. So this case is closed.
But do you think you have a political agenda?
What's the position that you were trying to make? Is it that there was no wrongdoing by the president?
Explain what you mean by that. The conclusion is that there is no case here.
The conclusion was that their charges were not warranted.
Correct.
The special counsel outlined a number of reasons why. Shortage of evidence to merit a charging decision.
Sure.
And also how that testimony, how a case might be perceived by a jury. But you're saying case closed, and you're drawing an equivalency to innocence. And the president even said, we're going to make some changes in how we address things here. We're going to try to put in place a system that we can ensure this never happens again. So are you saying that there was no wrongdoing in claiming that the case is closed?
Well, in America, we do have the presumption of innocence. And when a prosecutor spends 15 months investigating a case only to determine that there is no case here and that there will be no charges and that the case is closed, it only affirms the innocence of the president. And you're right, the president has made an announcement that he's going to set up a task force to examine how transitions handle their packing of papers and movement. You saw this today in the transcript of his interview with the special counsel that was released. The president talked openly about how, as presidents and vice presidents do, they rely on their staffs to pack up their papers and move boxes and things like that. So the president's actually taking action. We've actually seen every administration in the last 50 years having accidentally taken classified documents when they leave office. And he's going to do something about it. He's appointing a team to look at how those transitions are handled and make recommendations so we can avoid this happening again in the future. Gabe?
Ian, why did the president say that it was Robert Hur who brought up his son's death when the transcript shows otherwise?
Well, the transcript clearly shows that the president was being asked by the special counsel about the book that he wrote about his son's unfortunate and untimely passing and the grief and the pain that he felt and how he moved through that to try to find new purpose for the first time out of office, leaving office in 45 years. He was asked about the work of the cancer moonshot that the president's spoken very openly about for years, being motivated by the illness and the tragic death of his son, Beau, by brain cancer. These are the things that he was being asked about. So anybody who's familiar with this president's powerful story, emotional story of overcoming that loss and finding a new purpose and trying to keep going for the country to try to save our democracy and move our country forward. Anybody who's familiar with that story from the president will understand that the president's going to talk about his son, Beau. And I think the transcript makes plainly clear, and I think the American people understand this. The president remembers exactly when his son died. He carries that pain with him every day. He carries that emotional toll with him every day, and the transcript only makes that clear. MJ?
During the press conference, the president...
You just heard Robert Hur testifying for about 5 hours. Did the White House learn anything new from this testimony today? And I also just wanted to know, what do you think the American people should make of his statement that he has not exonerated the president?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think that the main thing I took away from the hearing today was that we had 3 hours of the Republicans showing just how hypocritical they're willing to be in order to politically attack the president. At the same time, that they and the Democrats and the special counsel himself laid bare exactly why there is no case here. The case is closed, the evidence did not support bringing charges, and it's over. It's time to move on. Sure. And the question that you asked about him claiming that he didn't exonerate the president, I mentioned this before. We have a presumption of innocence in this country. The job of a prosecutor is simple. It is binary. I heard the special counsel say that today. You either charge or you don't charge. And so if that's the decision, and the decision is made after a 15-month sprawling investigation, looking at every possible theory, turning over every rock to try to find any evidence that they can, and the evidence does not support bringing charges, that presumption of innocence takes it to another level. There is no case here. The president is innocent, and that was the conclusion of this case. Sungmin?
I wanted to follow up on Kate's point, because the president was pretty angry the night of the Hur report, saying how in the hell he raised that regarding the special counsel and his son's death. And the transcript does show that Hur did not bring up those deaths specifically. So does the president regret making that accusation?
Look, the president was very, I think, emotional about the fact that this special counsel, who, has spent 5 hours with the president, used his report to make a patently false claim that the president somehow doesn't remember when his son died. The transcript is now available for every American to see, for all the media to see, and you can see that the president remembers exactly the day his son died. He thought it was outrageous and inappropriate for that report to include such an inappropriate and extraneous comment like that, especially when it's clear that he says the day his son died. And so I think that you saw the anger and emotional reaction of a father who still experiences the pain of that loss every single day. And I think that it's not just us who have said it, it's not just others who have said it, it's former leadership at the Justice Department, former Attorney General, the former Deputy Attorney General, who have said that exact comment being in that report was inappropriate. And so that's what the president was reacting to.
Why would he say it's none of his damn business in the press conference?
Because all right, we were listening there to Ian Sams, representing the White House counsel's office, responding to special counsel Robert Hur's testimony on Capitol Hill today, which was pretty marathon, right? It went more than 3 hours. And if you remember, Hur basically cleared Biden of any wrongdoing in managing classified documents that irritated Republicans, but he also said that President Biden was a, quote, well-meaning elderly man with poor memory. That infuriated Democrats, and the special counsel's office here with a clear message, which Ian repeated many times, saying there's no case here, the case is now closed, and it's time to move on. He did say that Hur's comments were inappropriate about the president, and that in the end, they did not match up. As far as what will be done next, Ian Sams said that Biden is appointing a special task force now to study how presidential and private sensitive documents can be better packed up at the end of an administration.